Welcome to SparkMap. SparkMap is built and run by a team of data analysts, programmers, and GIS technicians who collect, clean, and aggregate data from reliable secondary sources. We make these data available through two powerful tools, the Community Needs Assessment and MapRoom. Need to build a community needs assessment or gather more data about your community? Use SparkMap to spend less time researching and more time implementing positive change. The following video will provide examples of how you can use SparkMap. To keep up with SparkMap, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and social media accounts.
So for any of you who are unfamiliar with SparkMap, we're a product of the University of Missouri Extension. There is our website here. We are the Center for Applied Research and Engagement Systems, or CARES for short. CARESHQ.org is the website where you can find CARES projects. And just a slight aside, we have that avian flu outbreak data in the SparkMap map room as well. And so at CARES and with SparkMap, we collect data from over 100 national secondary sources, including the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey and all of these other surveys. Like I said, this is just a small sampling. We've got CDC and FCC and Medicare and Medicaid services, county health rankings, lots of great stuff. And so we collect these data, we clean them up, and we make them easy to access through our two tools, the Community Needs Assessment and the Map Room. And so today, while we were looking at these tools, we're going to be focusing primarily on the Community Needs Assessment, and we're going to be looking at our newly updated American Community Survey data, which I'll be referring to as ACS throughout most of the webinar. So most of you likely know that the ACS is a yearly survey conducted by the U.S. Census Bureau to gather information from the United States and its residents. So specifically, this survey is getting information about jobs, education attainment, employment status, housing, demographics, and more. And so if your work pertains to understanding and improving communities, then ACS data is likely very, very relevant for you. On SparkMap, we have now updated to the 2019 to 2023 5-year estimates. So this data is collected over a 60-month period, making it more reliable overall, especially for our rural areas, our groups with lower populations or small population subgroups. And so because of the increased reliability of these 5-year estimates, we do not use the ACS 1-year estimates. So that is just something to have in mind while you are looking at our tools. We're happy to field questions about any of that at the end. We will leave some time for Q&A. But with all of that said, and without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jamie, and she will walk us through some of the updated data in SparkMap.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jordan. So it's really great to be here with you all today. As Jordan said, I'm going to show you a little bit of a couple of our new indicators in our report environment, and then we will have time at the end for any questions that folks might have. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So the Community Needs Assessment is available in SparkMap under the Create tab. So you'll see here, as Jordan mentioned, those two main tools, the Community Needs Assessment and the Map Room. We do have the old Map Room, if you guys are familiar with that, still available, but we are sunsetting that here over the next couple of months. So getting used to that new Map Room will be the best idea. So I'm just starting here on this first step in the needs assessment. I've picked a couple of counties here in Alabama that I'm interested in. And the indicators that I want to start with first, because we're just going to highlight a few of the new ACS or updated ACS indicators. And so the ones I want to start with are related to disability. So we have a couple of layers under demographics. The first two that I'm going to look at here is population with any disability, and then children with a disability or limited ability. We also have under income and economics, we have an employment indicator that is related. So we have employment by disability status. So those are the three that I'm going to look at together. We'll just talk through them a little bit, and we've got a couple more that we'll do as well. So if you're unfamiliar with our three-step process, it is that easy to be able to just select a location. Here I'm logged in, so I'm able to select more than one county. I've selected just a really small subset of the indicators available, and now I can generate my report. So you'll see here at the top, we have a couple of counties selected, so you can see those reflected under my location. And then we get really into our actual indicators themselves. So this first one is looking at population with disability, which isn't a new indicator. It is updated for that 2019 to 2023 time period, but we do have some additional breakouts available in some of these indicators that I wanted to spend some time on today. So first you'll see here that we've got an overall report location in our data table. This report location is going to be the aggregate of those three counties that I've selected, Clark, Franklin, and Monroe. The nice part about this is I do get that aggregate number, and I can see that my combined area is not doing quite as well as the state of Alabama and the rest of the United States. I can tell that by two things. The first is I have a red number in my data table. And the second is really this dial here right next to the data table that also gives me a red dial that tells me that we're not doing quite as well as those state and national averages. So if I wanted to dive a little bit deeper, I could, just looking at this data table, by seeing we have the kind of the total population. So we kind of know what is our N, what is the universe of people that we're looking at, how many of those have a disability, and then what is the percent. And so what we can see here very quickly is that Clark County has a much larger population, percent of their population, that is experiencing a disability than Franklin or Monroe. So that gives us a little bit of insight there. We can see that Monroe's is just a little bit higher than the state of Alabama, but all of them are much higher than that overall percentage for the rest of the United States. So getting into some of this breakout information, this is where we're able to look at things like race, age, ethnicity, and gender. So this first section here is gender. So we can see that it's broken out by male and female, which are the two major gender categories collected by most government agencies. And so you'll see here that we have, when we look at population, it's usually about 50-50, right? There's slightly more females than there are males, but overall, it's usually pretty even. So we would expect to see that also in this breakout by gender. And we do see that some, right? So we can see here in Clark County, we have a pretty even distribution. We can see that in Monroe County, we have a pretty even distribution. But it does seem like Franklin County, there is a bit of a slight difference, right? About 600, 500 people or so that look like, that are female that have a disability compared to males. So that could be something, that could be a follow-up question that you have that you could look into further. Is there an occupation that's slightly more dangerous? Are there other reasons, infant mortality or problems with birth, those types of things that may be causing some of the disabilities among the female population? The other thing that we can see here is the percentages. So we can see that it's kind of high for Clark County in terms of the number of males that have a disability. So about 20% of total males versus about 19% there for females. So that's just some additional information and ways to kind of think about, are there specific populations like females that may need additional services or we maybe need to look into a little bit more? As we scroll down, we can see the same information, some of the similar information broken out by age group. So here we can look at age under 18, so that would be our youth population, 18 to 64, which is our working age population, and then over the age of 65, so our seniors or our retired population. And again, we can see that there's a bit of an even distribution in many ways. But what we can see also is that Clark County has about 7% of their population under the age of 18 has a disability. So that is another kind of little flag there that you would want to ask the question, again, what's going on to cause that number to be so high? Does it have to do with birth complications, or are there other factors that are playing into this that can help us explain why that number might be so high for one county and not quite as high for others? We can see that, again, the distribution across the working age is pretty similar. It's higher than those state and national averages for all of the counties that we've selected. And again, it's higher, particularly for Clark County. So that's a way to look at the age breakouts here. And one thing that I want to mention is that sometimes folks get a little bit confused with some of these percentage tables. So we do have some very helpful text here in our STEM sentence that says, for example, among the population age 65 and over in the report area, the percentage of the population with a disability is X, right? So as we're looking at these different age categories, it's not the overall population, right? It's of those folks age 18 to 64, about 16.5% of them have a disability. So that's kind of some helpful ways to think about how we break these data down. We can get a little bit more specific by looking at total numbers versus percent. So we can see here those total numbers under the age of 18, 18 to 64, and then age 65 and over. So one thing to note here is that for whatever reason, again, some additional research could be done. In Clark County, we have that age 18 to 64. We can see it right here. Very high when compared to under 18 and over 65 there. And so we can see sort of this, the second county, Franklin County, is kind of more of an, what we would say a typical distribution. We've got about the same number of folks 18 to 64 and over 65 that have a disability. And so, but we can see a little bit of an anomaly here in Clark County. So we get into some ethnicity. So we do have things broken out by Hispanic or not Hispanic. So if you're not aware, those are the two major ethnicities that data are usually broken out by, is either Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino. So we can see what that looks like here. We can see the comparisons between our counties, and it does look like that Franklin County there has a slightly larger Hispanic population, again, that's experiencing disability. So that could be something that we look into. Then we get down into some race data. So we can see here, again, these are the major OMB categories that they collect race by. We can see that there are, you know, some percentages that pop out to us, some of those higher percentages, like of Asian folks in Clark County and in Franklin County. We can also see that there are some folks that identify as some other race in Monroe County, where we see those numbers to be pretty high as well. Finally, so here are the totals, so you can look at those by total as well. And then this is where I find this to be pretty interesting. We've got some population with any disability by disability status. So you can see here the different kind of statuses they look at: hearing, vision, cognitive, ambulatory, self-care, and independent living. And this tells us pretty quickly that most of the disabilities in this area of Alabama, we're looking at ambulatory types of things, so things that are related to physical motion, right? And so that gives us also a good idea of if we were to be thinking about programs, policies, other types of interventions that we would be wanting to offer in our communities. That gives us a better sense of the types of interventions or programs and services that we should be offering, given that there's a much higher number of folks with that ambulatory disability than any other disability there. One additional indicator that we have here is children, the children age. So we can see children with disabilities or limited abilities. These data are only available at the state level, so you can see that here, but just wanted to point that out. And then we have employment by disability status. So this is another way to look at folks that are in the community, whether they're employed or not. And so we can see the breakouts here. We can see employed with a disability versus without, and then we get those percentages as well. So we can see again a little bit here that like Monroe County is not quite doing as well as the other counties that we're looking at, and they're not quite doing as well compared to those state and national averages. And if we scroll down, we get a little bit more information about whether these folks are in the labor force, whether they're employed or not employed. So that will give us a little bit more information as well. We can see the number of people, like I said, in the labor force versus the number of people with a disability employed. And so those numbers are available. So that's the first example that I wanted to point out. Like I said, these are some additional breakout type of information that we have available to us through the American Community Survey. So the next grouping that I want to look at, so we're going to go from Alabama all the way over to New Mexico. Again, I've picked just a couple of counties, and now the indicators that I want to look at really are related to employment. So again, sort of building on that employment disability, but now kind of getting deeper into employment and educational attainment. So one of the indicators that we have from the ACS under income and economics is class of worker. So that's one that I want to look at. And then under education, we also have employment status by educational attainment. So those are the two indicators that I'm also going to take a little bit deeper dive into. And you see I've collected, or I've selected a couple of counties here in New Mexico. So here we get into class of workers. So I think this is obviously very relevant to kind of what we're experiencing across the United States right now. We have some federal workers who are being let go. And so people may be asking the question, how is this going to affect my community? How is this going to affect my county? And so these data from the ACS can really help us maybe foreshadow or forecast what might happen to some of those folks in our communities. So for example, we can see here that under the federal government workers column, we can see first the total number of people employed across these counties. And then we can see how many of those folks are employed by the federal government, state government, local government, for-profit, non-for-profit, and then self-employed or unpaid family workers. So those are the major categories there. We can see things like the federal government workers in Bernalillo County is very high, right? They've got a lot of federal government and state government and local government workers that may or may not be affected by some of the happenings at the federal level. That number is similar when you're looking at population size for Sandoval County. And then in Torrance County, we're seeing a much smaller number here. So may not have as a big of an impact, but definitely in Bernalillo and Sandoval counties, that's where you're really probably going to see a bigger hit there. We can see how that breaks out here in this nice little donut chart that gives us a little bit more information. We can see most folks are working for those for-profit companies, and so there's going to be some stability provided there by all of those for-profit workers. And then this is the same information, just broken out then by percentage. So nothing too new here. But then as we scroll down and we get into employment status by educational attainment, we can start to understand too maybe where some of those workers might go or where there might be some holes, right? So we can see here, for example, that we've got we've got first our total N, the population age 25 to 64. That's our good working age population. We can see how many folks without or a sub high school diploma, how many of those are unemployed. how many high school only diplomas are unemployed, and go up from there. So this is really looking at unemployment numbers by educational attainment. So we can see here that there's a few question marks that this brings up for me, specifically why the number of associates. So some college or associates, there's some pretty high numbers of unemployed people across all three of these counties. These are typically like the middle skill workers, right? So they're probably not working in high tech, high skilled jobs, but they also have more than a high school diploma. So they're probably not looking for minimum wage service worker jobs. They are those middle skills, right? And so we see already sort of a lot of folks in that area that are not employed. So that would be an area where more jobs are needed, and maybe even more of those folks that fall into that federal workforce might fall as well. If we scroll down, we can see then the opposite of that. So employed population by educational attainment, still looking at, we can see that 25 to 64 age range. We can see how many folks without a high school diploma or below a high school diploma are employed. So we can see that number here compared to high school only, compared again to that associate's degree and bachelor's degree. So here we can see, most of these counties are, making sure that folks are employed despite not having maybe a high school diploma. And again, then we can see some variation between that associate's degree, between associate's degree and the bachelor's degree. So in Franklin County, there's not a lot of variation there, but when we get up to, sorry, that's Sandoval County, Bernalillo County, there is a little bit more variation there. So that could be something that we could look into as well. So then we get those rates here, and this is very telling, I feel like, of no high school diploma. And we only see that 74% of those people in Torrance County are employed. So that would be another area, again, if you're thinking about how do we help folks without a high school diploma become more employed, right? Torrance County would be an area that you would probably want to spend more of your time, money, effort in, and it would be worth your while to look into what kinds of jobs are or are not available. Maybe some of those lower skilled minimum wage jobs just aren't there in Torrance County. And so that would be an opportunity for some workforce development. So that's another example. The final grouping that I wanted to look at today was our looking at housing, right? So first we started out with kind of disability, some demographics, looking at employment, and now looking at housing. So this time we're going to go back over to kind of the middle of the country, looking at a couple of counties here in Kentucky. Again, I've just selected these counties and I've gone to select my data. So there's a couple of indicators under the housing and family section that I want to look at. So tenure on owner-occupied housing, so people who own their homes, versus renter-occupied housing. So those are the two that I'm going to look at. And again, we've got some nice breakout data that we can look at within these indicators as well. So this is an indicator that gives you a little bit of additional information about sort of housing and families and what tenure means. So that gives you a little bit of background in case you are curious. But we'll dive right in here and we can start to see what these three counties in Kentucky, which aren't super close to one another, but they kind of represent a nice diverse, urban, suburban, and rural, what this looks like. And so what we can see here is that, we've got, the total number, again, our N of housing units, how many of those are owned and then what the percentage is of total population or total available homes. So here again, we can see that we've got one county, Oldham County, that's doing a pretty good job, right? They've got 88% of their homes in their county are owned by a person. And so, that relates to a lot of things like community engagement, being civically engaged, having a lot of ownership in your communities, those types of things too. So it's always good to see a high number here. But we don't see that necessarily in some of our other counties. So we can see here that a place like Bourbon County, we're not having as much success with folks owning homes. So we can dive a little bit deeper into this to see what it looks like. We also have these data available to us by race. So again, we're going to use kind of that sentence that we have available to you here. So of all those housing units with a white or black householder, this is the number of those that are owner occupied. So we can see, again, we've got a lower rate here in Bourbon County for folks that are white. We have a similarly low rate, I guess, for those that are black. And then it looks like we are lacking some folks with some of these other race and ethnicities as we go along. But what we can see here is that there are some counties, right, that are doing a little bit better job. Again, Oldham County, we can see here, we've got quite a few. We don't have as big of a delta between white and black. And then we've got basically all of the folks that are Asian, American Indian, or some other race, we can see are more likely to be household or house owners, homeowners than not. But we don't see that same trend at all in Bourbon County or in Boone County. Boone County is really the biggest one where we can see that 80% of people who are white own a home, but only 41% of folks that are black own a home. So that would be something, that would be an area to explore. How do we work on that? Is it related to mortgage lending? Is it related to education or financial assistance? How does it look compared to income, right? So those are some additional questions that we could ask of the data. We can look at this again as total numbers as well. So we can see here that it is true. We don't have a lot going on in terms of diversity among some of these race and ethnicity categories in some of our counties, but in others we definitely do. And so we would want to see a number like 35,000, something much closer, right, under this black category than we do currently. And same goes for this last county here as well. We can also see this information broken out by age group. So not only are we looking for potential issues of equity related to race and ethnicity, but we can also look at it related to age as well. So here we can see, for example, it's pretty obvious that as you get older, you're more likely to become a homeowner, right? That's pretty clear. However, some of the things that we do see here are that there's pretty low home ownership rates among our younger age groups. And there's pretty high home ownership rates among some of our older age groups. And so, kind of the conversation is how do we cycle more young people into home ownership, right? And how do we make sure that there are enough homes, right, available for those people to buy? So there's some counties, right, that are doing a little bit better than others. As we get through to age 25 to 34, here in Oldham County, we can see that number goes up significantly, 71, 88, 93%. And that's exactly what you want to see, right? But then you want to see a little bit more of a drop off than what we have here to make room for some of those younger folks to be buying homes, right? So we can kind of see how that plays out here. In general, though, we can look at Bourbon County and we can say, there's a lot of work to be done across all age groups, except for, I guess, 85 plus, right? These numbers are, not as good, right? As when we're looking at comparing to other counties and even those state and national averages, we can see that home ownership rates in Bourbon County are just lower in general than those other counties across all age groups. And then we can see that same information here with totals. So it's sometimes helpful to see both, right? To kind of see total counts and get a sense of what total population looks like across these counties. But we still see those same patterns. The last part of this is the renter occupied housing. So again, we're looking at, instead of owning a home, how many people in this area are renting. So we can see things like, again, total number of rental units, right, available, how many of those are occupied, and then what is that percentage. As we scroll down, we can start to see then again those race breakouts. And this is where, again, we can start to see some of the differences between racial categories when it comes to renting. Just as we saw previously, we saw that there were a lot of folks who identify as Black that are not homeowners. We can see that that same is true as we look at renters. A lot of folks that identify as Black are renters, right? And there are less folks that identify as white that are renting, right? So we also see that even those small numbers for Asian and American Indian, those folks are more likely to be renters in Bourbon County than they are in other places, right? So that gives us a little bit of insight as well in terms of, are we providing opportunities for people that are other than white to be homeowners, to get through that process, to get the financial assistance they need? Again, we can see this same information broken out by totals, and then we get down into our age groups as well. So again, we typically see a lot more people that are young renting. So that's kind of pretty normal as we see some of these higher numbers here. But what we don't want to see is high numbers of people kind of in this working age category still renting. Those are the folks that we want to have already transitioned to being homeowners. And we can see that there are a couple of areas here in Bourbon County where that's not the case. We've got 33, 36% of folks that are renters versus homeowners. So that would be another group of folks that could be provided with some additional assistance when it comes to financial planning and home ownership. Same goes, we can see here those group totals, and we get some nice donut charts across all of these. So we have a lot of ACS indicators, so we obviously didn't have the time to go through all of them today, but did want to point out some of those where we do have those additional breakouts and you're able to get more granular, see into some of those special populations and look for potential disparities between age groups, ethnicity, and race. So that's all available to you. The last thing that I just want to point out is that we do, under the data tab on SparkMap, have the community needs assessment indicator list. If you type in American Community Survey, or here I just typed in American Community, this will give you a list of all of the ACS data that we do have available in SparkMap. And the nice part, I think, is that it tells you too the supplemental data. So do we have breakouts for race, age, ethnicity, gender for any of these indicators? And so as you scroll down, you can see those list all of the breakouts that we do have available for each of them. So you can see that this is a pretty extensive list. A lot of our data does come from the American Community Survey. And if you wanted to look at this not on the web, you can download this list as an Excel file or a CSV and sort it or search, for those different breakouts. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jordan. I think she's going to talk a little bit about finding old data, because we recognize that sometimes you need old data too. So I'll stop sharing and turn it right back over to Jordan.
All right, thanks, Jamie. I will share my screen, and like Jamie said, we recognize that sometimes you all need access to older data. And so in our report, which is updated to our most recent 5-year estimates from the ACS, we have this option to look at our 2018 to 2022 ACS indicators and generate reports using those data. And so to do that, we would just go to our community needs assessment and then click this link at the top of the page. And so really quickly to show you all, I will generate a report. We will look at Georgia and we will do Appling County and bacon. We'll do apples and bacon. And then move over to our indicators. So I'll highlight a couple of different ACS indicators really quickly while I'm doing this. So let's look at our households with no computer, no or slow internet, and maybe cellular internet only. Now note that this report contains all of our indicators. And so it is not a report of just ACS indicators. You can still create reports with all of the other SparkMap data that you need. And so now I'm going to move to my final report. And as you can see, we've got our data for our 2 selected counties, our aggregate report location, and our link back to the original source, and our note letting us know that we are looking at 2018 to 2022 data. So these data are households with cellular internet only, with no computer, and the no computer in particular has some great breakouts. So we're able to look at population with dial-up alone, population with a broadband subscription, and population without an internet subscription at all. We are also down here with households with no or slow internet, able to look at computer or internet subscription by employment status. And so, if our number of unemployed folks without internet is really high, or our percentage is really high, and in these cases it is for all for both of those counties, this might be an area of concern because a lot of our job applications now are online. And so something else that I want to point out with this report really quickly is that it has all of the bells and whistles that you're going to find in your usual SparkMap report. And so let's say you are a premium annual SparkMap subscriber, you would be able to view these data by zip code using that report options, show zip code data feature here. And now we have all of our zip codes that are in those 2 counties listed out in our report tables. We also, in these reports and in the regular SparkMap report, have the ability to generate some custom locations for your report. And so that is something that is going to be available at the premium quarterly and premium annual level. And if you have any questions about these special report options or about any of the features that we've shown off today, we have our really nice support section on the site. And we have tutorials for all of the components of our 2 tools, the needs assessment and the map room. And so these tutorials will give you a quick 3 to 4 minute video kind of walking you through how to do something. And then we also have step-by-step instructions with screenshots. In addition to that, I want to quickly note that in our map room, we have all of the updated ACS data that we have in the report, and then some. And then we also house historic data in the map room. And so if you are looking for ACS data from a couple years back, the map room is our place to search.
Thank you for learning more about SparkMap. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out via the contact form on sparkmap.org. Don't forget to subscribe.